Today, I think we'll launch right into this business about Columbus. What a guy. When Columbus came to America, he thought he landed in the Indies. So we call everybody Indians, and that was the first mistake, and we're still called Indians. And it's all right, but we have our own names. Every one of our Indian nations has a name, and that's who we are. So when we were getting ready to come over there, we said, well, how are we going to call ourselves as a common name? And so we had a meeting up in Vancouver, 1975. It was at that time that we said, we'll call ourselves indigenous. And prior to that, there was no discussion about indigenous. That was our determination, our self-determination to do that. So indigenous became, when we said we are the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. That was our presentation of ourselves. When Columbus returned and made his report, the Pope at the time said, if there are no Christian nations in these new lands that you have discovered, he said, I declare those lands to be empty, terra nullius and terra nullius, empty land. Further, he said, if there are people there and they are not Christians, then they do not have a right of title to land. That's 1493, Papal Bull, 1 year after the discovery. We were disenfranchised by fiat, by a statement, by somebody across the water, because we weren't Christians. And of course there weren't Christians here. And so began this long process. And the people that were coming, although they weren't agreeing with each other in Europe, that one worked okay. They said, well, that works for us. And so from that came the Law of Nations. What they call the Law of Nations. And the indigenous people were disenfranchised, and we were something less than people in that discussion, and so therefore not eligible for human rights. And why, when we were in Geneva in 1977, they called us populations. Terminology is important. And if you don't understand what the terminology is, you can agree to some bad things. So we had to learn all of that. We had to struggle and find out ourselves just exactly how to operate in this really hostile atmosphere. And we did. We fought our way through. And finally, in 2007, we said, well, we can't be going on like this forever. Let's put it out there. Let's demand that they address us and accept or reject. Vote it up or vote it down, but don't fuss with it. The Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Peoples with an S. People is generic, and as soon as you put an S on it, then it's specific, then it becomes Arapahoes and Cheyennes and Navajos. Peoples with an S. We learned that. It took us 30 years to learn that. But we also learned that we were not humans. We were less than humans by a declaration in 1493. That's called the Doctrine of Discovery. And the Doctrine of Discovery worked in Asia, it worked in Australia, it worked in Africa, it worked wherever Christian nation was going and colonizing. And it's operational today. When the Oneida Indian Nation was presenting its land rights or defending itself from a position taken by a small town in upstate New York called Sherrill. Sherrill said, Oneida's got to pay taxes here. And Oneida said, what do you mean pay taxes? You're sitting on our land. And the courts agreed with the Oneidas and finally got to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court reversed that and said, yeah, you're right. You're right, Sherrill. People have to pay taxes. Complete reversal. Supreme Court of the United States, just a political decision, no doubt about it. So they're going to finish the work that started in 1493, which has extinguished title, extinguished people. And during that opening discussion, and if you get the court papers, and the first notation in the Supreme Court decision is, guess what? Doctrine of Discovery, 2007. So you think that's old work? You think that's a long time ago? 2007, 3 years ago. Doctrine of Discovery, that we're not eligible. Whole title. So there's a lot at stake about this business. So what we did, being who we are, we had a special North American regional representative to the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Is a young lady by the name of Tanya Frischner, who's Onondaga, Sniper Clan. And Tanya holds this position, so she worked along with us, and we developed a preliminary discussion on the rights of indigenous peoples. And the preliminary study of the impact on indigenous people of the international legal construct known as the Doctrine of Discovery. And we submitted that last year. And we said that we would want now a special expert study on the Doctrine of Discovery. This is a preliminary study, and we focused on the US, because that's what we know the most about. So, in summary, it says this. At its 8th session in May 2009, the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues decided to appoint as special rapporteur Tanya Gunilla Frischner, a member of the Permanent Forum, to conduct a preliminary study of the impact on indigenous peoples of the international legal construct known as the Doctrine of Discovery, which has served as the foundation of the violation of their human rights, and to report thereon to the Forum at its 9th session. This preliminary study establishes that the Doctrine of Discovery has been institutionalized into law and policy on national and international levels, and lies at the root of the violations of indigenous peoples' human rights, both individual and collective. This has resulted in state claims to and the mass appropriations of lands, territories, and resources of indigenous peoples. Both the Doctrine of discovery and a holistic structure that we term the framework of dominance have resulted in centuries of virtually unlimited resource extraction from the traditional territories of indigenous peoples. This, in turn, has resulted in the dispossession, impoverishment of indigenous peoples, and the host of problems that they face today on a daily basis. That's just the opening shot. Given the United States of America as the federal Indian law is most accessible to the special rapporteur, and because it serves as an ideal example of the application of the doctrine of discovery to indigenous people, this preliminary study provides a detailed examination of the premise of that system as found in the United States Supreme Court ruling Johnson-Lisi versus McIntosh. That's the one. Evidence is then provided demonstrating that the doctrine of discovery continues to be treated as valid by the United States government. The Special Rapporteur concludes by recommending that an international expert group meeting be convened to discuss in detail the findings and the implications of this preliminary study of the doctrine of discovery and present its findings to the permanent forum at its annual session. Further study and review will be needed to ascertain to what extent and how the doctrine of discovery and the framework of dominance are applied to indigenous people throughout the world. It was accepted, and 2012 has been designated the year when an expert study will look at the doctrine of discovery on the international construct, which really shakes the root of all colonization. It challenges title to land. And so, yeah, McIntosh, that was where they installed it right into US law, where Judge Marshall said, well, he said, the lands we've been taken has been taken under this structure, and we're not going to change now. Well, we jeopardize everything that we've taken so far, so that became U.S. federal law, the Doctrine of Discovery. In 1955, when the Gitsan Indians challenged, they were refused on the Doctrine of Discovery by the Supreme Court in the United States. And again, 2007. Well, it didn't surprise us, because we've been in this field, we've been working at this, but the rest of the country has no idea. You don't have, I know that. Just a few people here have an idea what this is. So, justice. You know, when the peacemaker made our confederation, he said 3 principles. Peace. First principle, peace. Second principle, equity. Equity for the people. And the third principle, the power of the good minds to be united in thought, mind, and spirit. Power. This will give you authority. They stand there today. Those principles are still here. And we have to adhere to them. There's a lot of work ahead. There's people suffering in all parts of the world, and we have to be responsible.